Welcome to Maritime Pakistan, your gateway to the fascinating world of oceans and the opportunities they present to every one of us. Today's video explores naval warfare through the book, fleet tactics, and coastal combat. Today, we will discuss the fourth chapter, World War II, A Weaponry Revolution. Now, World War II, it completely flipped the script on warfare, right? And nowhere was that change more dramatic, more explosive than out on the open ocean. The age of the giant battleship was fading, and the age of the aircraft carrier was dawning. But here's the thing, how did that actually happen? It wasn't like someone just flipped a switch. No, it was this brutal, messy, chaotic process of learning, basically while you were getting shot at. So today, we're going to dive deep into how naval combat got totally rewritten in just a handful of years.
So, here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll look at just how revolutionary this whole thing was. Then, we'll break down the 5 new tactical nightmares that commanders had to deal with. We'll get into why striking first became everything, the key to survival. And then, we'll see how the entire game changed again as fleet defense became almost unbeatable. It's a fantastic story of life or death innovation.
All right, first up, a revolution in warfare. So, was the rise of the aircraft carriers some obvious, telegraphed revolution that everyone saw coming? Absolutely not. It was a complete and chaotic upheaval, where everybody, on all sides, was pretty much making it up as they went along.
It's so easy for us to look back now and say, well, of course the aircraft carrier was the future. But back in the early 1940s, the battleship was still the king of the sea. These were terrifyingly powerful ships. For example, in 1940, a couple of German battleships caught the British carrier HMS Glorious out in the open and just blew it out of the water with their massive guns. The question of whether a flimsy little airplane could actually sink a heavily armored, maneuvering warship, well, that was far from a settled debate.
This quote from back in 1930 just perfectly captures the terrifying reality of early carrier warfare. See, without good radar, finding the enemy was just a blind, dangerous guessing game. Fleets were like blindfolded men armed with daggers. It wasn't some formal duel, it was sudden, it was chaotic, and it was very, very likely to be fatal for one or even both of you.
So, this brand new kind of warfare created a whole new set of problems, 5 of them to be exact. And they were all interconnected, and they had to be solved not in some war college classroom, but right in the middle of the Pacific with literally everything on the line.
Okay, problem number 1. How do you even arrange your ships? Do you give each of your incredibly expensive, super vulnerable carriers its own little defensive screen of destroyers and cruisers? That gives you flexibility, lets you spread out. Or do you group multiple carriers inside one single, much stronger ring of escorts to get maximum anti-aircraft firepower? Big decision.
Second big problem. Do you spread your carrier groups out, maybe hundreds of miles apart, so you can attack the enemy from different directions at the same time? Or do you keep them all bunched together, massing your forces so they can defend each other with overlapping fighter patrols? The Japanese, by the way, absolutely love to divide their forces, and we're going to see how that worked out for them.
The third problem was a huge trade-off. A carrier can only hold so many planes, right? So what do? Do you load it up with bombers and torpedo planes to maximize your attack punch? Or do you pack it with fighters to defend your own fleet from the enemy's attack? See, every single bomber you add is one less fighter you have for protection. It's a real balancing act.
Now, this one is really fascinating. During the day, carriers absolutely owned the battlefield with their long-range air power, no question. But at night, they were sitting ducks. A formation of battleships and cruisers could steam 200 miles under the cover of darkness and suddenly be right on top of you at dawn for a devastating gun battle. This created this constant 24-hour tactical dilemma.
And finally, the most complex problem of them all. A fleet's mission was rarely just to go out and sink the other guy's fleet. Usually, they were also protecting an amphibious invasion force. So how do you do both? How do you send your forces out to destroy the enemy carriers while also providing air cover for your own vulnerable transports and the Marines hitting the beaches? To really understand how they solved these problems, we've got to grasp the fundamental change in what combat even looked like. Naval warfare went from being this slow, grinding affair to a sudden, decisive knockout punch.
Think about it like this. The old-school gunnery battles, they were erosive. Both sides would trade salvos, slowly chipping away at each other. It was a battle of attrition. But carrier warfare? That was all about pulse firepower. An entire air wing arriving over a target all at once was a single, massive pulse of destructive energy that could literally end the fight in minutes. And that meant striking first became everything.
And this table, wow, it just lays it all out, doesn't it? Take a look. You've got a fight between 3 carriers and 2 carriers. Okay, pretty straightforward. If the stronger force, let's call them Force A, strikes first, they win. Decisively, 3-0. No surprise there. But, and this is the game changer, look at that second line. If the weaker force, Force B, gets that first shot in, they can absolutely cripple the larger fleet. They end up with a 2-1 advantage. I mean, this was a total 180-degree reversal of all known naval logic. It meant that scouting, intelligence, just finding the other guy first, that became the most important weapon you could possibly have.
So keeping this new model in mind, let's see how commanders actually solved those 5 big problems. We can see the whole evolution just by comparing the offense-heavy battles of 1942 with the defense-dominant reality of 1944.
In early 1942, Japan's empire was expanding at a pace that was just breathtaking. I mean, just look at this map. Their forces were stretched incredibly thin, trying to do everything, everywhere, all at once. And this forced them to constantly split their fleets, which is really the key to understanding the tactical choices they made at huge battles like the Coral Sea and Midway. Midway is the perfect example of this first strike world. The U.S. was outnumbered, 3 carriers to Japan's 4. But they got the first shot in, thanks to some brilliant intelligence work. And in a matter of minutes, American dive bombers caught the Japanese carriers with their planes all over the decks, refueling and rearming. They became floating infernos. 3 of Japan's best carriers gone in one devastating blow. The battle was basically decided right there. The smaller force had won a stunning victory simply because they landed the first punch.
But things didn't stay that way. 1943 was kind of this lull, a year of rebuilding for both sides. And by 1944, the entire equation had completely flipped on its head. The U.S. Navy, now armed with new technology and a lot of hard-won experience, had created a fleet where defense was king.
Now, check out the Battle of the Philippine Sea in 1944. It was nicknamed the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot for a reason. This time, the U.S. had 15 carriers to Japan's 9. The Japanese actually attacked first, launching wave after wave of planes, but they flew straight into an impenetrable wall of American fighters, all guided by radar and a fleet just bristling with anti-aircraft guns. The result? It was a slaughter. The Japanese air wings were just annihilated, and the U.S., they didn't lose a single ship to air attack. Defense had become so powerful that it completely canceled out that first strike advantage.
So what happened? What caused this massive shift? How did the defense become so powerful that it changed the very nature of carrier warfare?
Well, it came down to 4 key things. First, technology. Air search radar gave U.S. fleets precious minutes of warning to get their fighters in the air. Second, intelligence. American codebreakers were consistently reading Japanese communications, which robbed them of the element of surprise. Third, tactics. The U.S. Navy learned to mass their carriers in these tight formations, creating overlapping fields of anti-aircraft fire that were almost impossible to get through. And finally, force composition. The U.S. dramatically ramped up the number of fighters on its carriers, from about a quarter of the air wing in 42 to over 2/3 by 44. And really, this is the ultimate takeaway. This is the big idea. The very definition of what it meant to win a battle at sea had completely changed. Think about it. In 1942, the whole game was about how do we sink their carriers? But by 1944, that question had shifted. It became, how do we destroy their aircraft? Because if you could achieve total air supremacy over the enemy fleet, well then their carriers were just helpless floating targets. It was a revolution in thinking that redefined naval warfare forever, and you can still see its echoes in the carrier fleets of today. We hope that you liked today's video. Post your questions in the comments section for future videos.